What's a subtle sign that someone is a good person but doesn't want to show it? Had a teacher growing up that came across as very strict and standoffish, gave off this air of learn the material or fail. In reality though, he would answer any questions you had, even if it was being repeated, was incredibly patient, and would stay as late as he needed to in order to make sure the students understood the material. If a majority of the class bombed a test, he would address it with the class to understand what went wrong, and would redo the material if needed. Looking at him or just popping by his class, you'd think he'd be a typical hard-ass, but in reality he cared immensely about making sure we understood our lessons and were prepared for the next year. I had a math teacher like this in high school. She assigned mountains of homework and was super obnoxious about showing your work for everything. I was always a bit of a challenge for her. I picked up the material super quickly, but unknowingly had undiagnosed it, so I would immediately lose interest the second I grasped the ideas. And showing work was painful when I could find shortcuts to get the right answers. She eventually wore me down to the point where I did show all of my work and kept me engaged by calling on me to go up to the board and do a difficult problem in front of the class while talking through what I was doing. Looking back, I realized she was calm, infinitely patient and as thorough as the student needed her to be. She could communicate advanced concepts in multiple ways so that every student could grasp a concept in the way that made the most sense to them. After college, I went back and thanked her for being by far the best math teacher I'd ever had. She told me that she had regular visits from prior students like me, and that those visits are what drove her. I never really saw it while her student, but she had a killer eye sense of humor. I inadvertently took up her entire off period and apologized profusely when students started coming in, but she insisted that I stay for a few minutes. She asked if I remembered how to complete the square, which was a method for solving a particular type of polynomials. Yeah, I think so. She wrote the problem on the board and asked me to solve it while explaining all of the steps. I can't express how happy that made me and how proud I was to do it perfectly for her. Bravo, Mr. CFCS. Have you done that since you were last in my class 5 years ago? No? Then tell me, was all of that homework worth it? Yes. Absolutely. When you're in a group and that one person keeps trying to say something or add to the conversation but they keep getting talked over, then that other person will look at them and say, "Sorry person, I didn't catch what you were trying to say, can you repeat it?" And makes space for the person being ignored unintentionally. That's a real gem. I waited tables at a pretty popular New Mexican restaurant when I was in college. There was this one manager, her name was Rosie, and she never smiled. She always looked like she was pissed off at everyone and everything. The entire wait staff and bus staff feared her. When she walked into the kitchen and wanted something, the line would immediately jump to her demands. It was rumored that she was the person to fire any employee when an employee was fired. The only people that didn't seem to be scared of her were the hostesses. They were always talking to her like she was just any other manager or person in the restaurant. She scared the hell out of me for the first year I worked there. I made sure that she never had anything to be upset at with me. One day, I came into work sick as fuck and having just a really bad day. She took me to the side and talked to me for a good half hour. Just asking questions about my day and how school was going. Towards the end of the conversation she said I didn't look good and that if I wanted to, I could take the night off. Rosie was the best fucking person I ever met inside the restaurant industry. From that day on it was my goal to make her laugh. I never did make her laugh, but I got a smile out of her quite a bit after that. She was not just a good person, she was one of the best. But man, you wouldn't know it unless you really took the time to look. She was one of those types of people you know had had a hard time in life and put up a rough exterior. But deep down she was a softy and loving grandmother type. I hope she's happy in her retirement. Guy I used to work with was such a class clown, always cracking jokes. Everybody liked him because he was so funny. It was a while before I realized that his jokes were never at anybody's expense. He was kind. There was never anything mean in anything he ever said, to anybody's face or behind their back. Anyway, we're married now. When someone is actually in trouble / needs help, they will help out, even if it's really subtle or disguised as something else. For instance, there was a kid in my school who had a reputation for not caring about others, doing whatever he wanted, and tried to convince everyone that he pretty much had no emotions. I think he thought it made him seem more tough and hardcore, and although he didn't necessarily do anything bad to anyone, he tried not to seem kind either. Once, one of my friends at school had some sort of emergency where she needed, I think, $30. Most people in class either didn't have $30, which was quite a bit for a kid to bring to school, to loan her, or they just didn't want to give it to her, thinking they would never get it back, and she was panicking. The teachers couldn't help her for some sort of legal reason. I think she wanted to take a taxi to the hospital because something had happened to a family member but was slightly underage, and the teachers had to pretend that they had no idea she was doing this. So, this kid with the reputation collected money from all of his friends, since he didn't have the money himself, under the pretense of another reason. I think it was something like movie tickets or something for that evening. Then, he privately gave it to her, but told her not to tell anyone it was him. I was close friends with her and was actually standing right next to her when he approached us and told us this. She managed to get to the hospital on time, while he paid for the tickets or whatever with his own money once he got home. When she later offered to pay him back, he refused, insisting that he didn't do anything. I think he knew that her family would struggle to pay that back. They were having some financial trouble. I guess it's not extremely subtle in my case since I was standing right there, but that was the first time I began realizing how some people pretended to not be a good person when they actually were. I was at school with a guy who was the king of the cool kids. He was always getting busted for breaking school rules, drinking, smoking, bad-mouthing the teachers and so on. In fact, he did a bit of jail time later, for non-violent low-level drug dealing. I was the uber geek of the school. I didn't get bullied as such, but I remember one time that his cool gang kids were ribbing me a bit too much, and he stepped in and told them to cool it, and a bit later, when I won the school academic prize, he went out of his way to sincerely congratulate me. In fact, a few years later, and after the jail time, he became pretty well known as a TV personality and had his own show, where he was generally lauded as giving the impression of being a really nice guy, which, in this case, he was. My ex-wife's father was diagnosed with a stage 4 cancer. About 2 months before he passed, my in-laws' apartment burned down. No renter's insurance, almost everything went up in smoke due to electrical fire. They moved in with us. Right around same time my AC went, so I called a friend of a friend and he came out to look at AC. Did $800 or so job and we were just shooting shit and I told him casually about the fire. He wouldn't take a penny and told me to use the money to buy something for her parents at their new place. Bedding, whatever stuff they needed. Wouldn't take the money, full stop. I used the money for their security deposit on the place. None of our so-called close friends did such thing. No one bothered to even ask how they can help. About 6 months later, he invited us to his birthday party. We went and I said a toast, telling everyone how good of a person he was. I had a hard time finishing the toast, because almost everyone choked up. Except my ex, who looked at me like I was scum. When we got home, she said, "I was so embarrassed you were singing him praises. You don't even know this man and yet it was like you were trying to climb up his ass. You're pathetic." It didn't matter what they did, apparently, because I put out the cash. The fact that I was going to pay that money to him and he didn't take it, giving it to her parents apparently didn't matter. So here are the two opposites. No regrets. I had a maths teacher who used to bust my chops. He was fun, but also very temperamental. He'd be silly to a point, then tell you off when you out-sillied his silliness. I was sat opposite a quiet girl who suddenly looked really distressed. She said something to him in a whisper, and he looked down to a puddle on the floor. She'd wet herself. This was when we were 11 to 12, so it was quite a big deal. I clocked this at the same time, and he gave me this look like don't you dare. He went over to his desk, poured himself a water, then came back and was pretending to peer at her work, before stumbling and dropping it on her. He apologized and made a big scene and told her she could go and get a spare uniform from the office as it was his mistake. I really respected that. I think it showed a lot about his character and care. They say they are not a good person, and can give you examples of times they have done things wrong. Truly bad people cannot admit to or even recognize when they have done wrong. This is basically the what are your strengths and weaknesses? Question in job interviews. If they say I have no weaknesses and I never do wrong, chances are they are a sociopath. It's more likely than them actually being perfect. People who make excuses to do good deeds. Picking you up from the airport. Oh, it was on my way. Buying you a beer. I accidentally ordered two. Helping you move. I need the workout. Now I don't have to go to the gym later. Volunteering at an event. I had nothing else going on tonight, I'm just here cause my buddy asked me to. Anyone who does a favor for you and then acts like you're doing them a favor, or brushes the favor off as nothing, is a person who is doing the good deed for the sake of it and not for the praise or clout they receive. These are the best kinds of people. I love it when people are good deceptively. Like when they give you the shoes you've been wanting but can't afford because they were the wrong size and it's too late for me to take them back, or when they claim they found $20 in your couch cushions but you know it's from their own wallet. The kind of lying that's to keep people from thanking them is the best kind of lying there is. My mom used to make us ask for stuff we didn't need from our neighbors every now and then. Some salt or an egg or something really small. Never paid much attention to it. Neighbors' kids used to have breakfast etc. at our place from time to time, maybe few times a week. Years later, 15 years or so, I met that family and one of them told me they knew we didn't need anything probably but used to ask them for little things to not make it seem one-sided, as it seems my mom was helping their mom. That's what their mom told/taught them, and now they did the same as they were in a better place financial too. When they have the largest penis in the locker room and they compliment you on your tiny penis rather than brag about theirs and whack you in the face with it.